The termination letter was still folded in his jacket pocket when Marcus Ferrell knocked on Mrs. Whitfield's door for what he thought might be the last time he could afford breakfast for both of them. 3 days earlier, he had been walking out of Holloway Industries with a cardboard box of framed photos and a coffee mug, escorted by security past co-workers who wouldn't meet his eyes. 14 years of loyalty, ended in a 12-minute meeting. And now, standing on the cracked concrete steps of the small yellow house next door, he wasn't sure how he'd keep the promise he'd made 2 years ago, that no matter what happened, he would show up. If you believe kindness deserves a second chance, hit like, drop a comment, share this with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Hope and Wisdom, because stories like this one are just getting started. Marcus was 38, raising his 8-year-old daughter Junie alone since his wife passed from illness 3 winters back. He worked long hours as an operations manager, the kind of job that ate weekends and holidays, but he never once missed his morning ritual, knocking on Eleanor Whitfield's door before sunrise, bringing her oatmeal, checking her blood pressure medication, sitting with her for 20 quiet minutes before rushing off to work. She had no children of her own, no visitors besides him, and a hip that had never healed right after a fall 2 winters ago. Marcus never asked for anything in return. He simply believed that a person shouldn't be forgotten just because the world had grown too busy to notice her. That morning, he brought her oatmeal like always, though his hands trembled slightly as he set the bowl down. "You lost your job," Eleanor said, not as a question. Her eyes, pale blue and sharper than people expected from a woman of 81, studied his face the way she always did. Marcus exhaled and told her everything, how the company had restructured, how his position was eliminated days after he'd raised concerns about safety violations on the warehouse floor, how the severance was barely enough to cover 2 months of rent, let alone Junie's school fees. He didn't tell her he'd cried in his truck that morning before coming to her door. Some things a man kept to himself. Eleanor listened without interrupting, then reached over and patted his hand with fingers thin as paper. "You still came," she said. "Bad day for you, and you still came. I told you I would." "Most people say that," she said quietly. "Fewer people mean it." Over the following weeks, Marcus searched for work while stretching every dollar Junie's school lunch money, second-hand shoes, skipped meals he didn't mention to his daughter. Yet every single morning, rain or frost or exhaustion, he showed up at Eleanor's door. Junie sometimes came with him before school, reading her homework aloud to Eleanor, who listened like each spelling word was poetry. Eleanor began to feel like family in the truest sense, chosen, not obligated. Then, on a gray Tuesday morning 6 weeks after his firing, Marcus arrived at Eleanor's house to find an unfamiliar black car parked outside. His stomach tightened as he walked up the path, worried something had happened to her overnight. He knocked, and the door opened. Standing there, dressed casually in a way Marcus had never seen him before, was Richard Calloway, the CEO of Holloway Industries, the man whose signature had been on Marcus's termination letter. For a moment, neither man spoke. Marcus felt the old humiliation rise in his throat, the sting of being discarded after years of hard work. But Richard's expression wasn't cold or dismissive. It was something closer to shame. "She's my aunt," Richard said finally, voice rough. "My mother's sister. We had a falling out years ago, long story, my pride, mostly. I only found out last week she'd been struggling alone, that a neighbor had been the only one checking on her every single day." He paused, swallowing hard. "That neighbor was you." Eleanor appeared behind him, leaning on her cane, eyes glistening. "I told him everything, Marcus. Every morning, every meal, every time you sat with an old woman nobody else remembered." Richard stepped forward, extending a hand that trembled slightly. "I signed off on cuts I didn't fully understand. I trusted numbers over people, and I let go of someone who apparently has more character than half my leadership team. I owe you an apology, and if you're willing to hear it, I'd like to offer you something more than your old position back." Marcus stood frozen, the weight of weeks of fear and quiet dignity pressing against this unexpected moment. He hadn't done any of it for recognition. He'd done it because Eleanor mattered, because showing up was simply who he was. But standing there, watching the man who once represented the coldest version of corporate indifference now humbled on his aunt's doorstep, Marcus felt something shift, not triumph, but a quiet, aching relief. "I didn't do it for a reward," Marcus said softly. "I know," Richard replied. "That's exactly why you deserve one." If this story moved something in you, please like, comment, and share it. Someone out there needs the reminder that kindness is never wasted, even when no one is watching. Before we go any further, drop the word kindness in the comments if you believe good things eventually find their way back to good people. In the weeks that followed, Marcus returned to Holloway Industries not as an operations manager, but as head of a newly created employee welfare division, a role Richard insisted on creating himself, inspired by the very compassion that had once gone unnoticed. Eleanor beamed every morning as Marcus brought her oatmeal, no longer rushing, no longer afraid. Junie skipped beside him some mornings, laughing at Eleanor's old stories, unaware that her father's quiet devotion had rewritten their entire future. Some doors close because the world moves too fast to see what truly matters. But sometimes, if you keep knocking with a good heart, the right door eventually opens.